Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Return to the Realm, a rereaders podcast for the Realm of the Elderlings series by Rob and Hobb. I'm Anand, here with Alex and Leah. Leah, I do this every time. And today we're going to be covering chapters 17 through 21 of Royal Assassin. Hopefully, though, if this is anything like last time, we might not get there, but here's hoping. So this section is sort of just things go from bad to worse as there's this whole thing where Verity does not know what to do, and then Ketrican in the next chapter brings in the idea of like, why don't you go to the Elderlings? And then Verity's like, actually, you know what? This is sort of like our only last ditch effort that we can do. He leaves, and then Regal wastes no time in causing mischief and essentially completely screwing over the monarchy and the kingdom. So the last few chapters are basically just things going from bad to worse in that regard. But yeah. So last time we left off halfway through chapter 17, and I'm going to be honest, I remember like one thing I didn't say, but I don't remember quite where we left off. So I might repeat some stuff from last episode. So hopefully that's not too much of an issue.
Yeah, I have no clue where we ended either, so it's fine.
No, yeah. Same.
All I remember is like I remember getting really excited about mentioning the best thing to come out of the stable since a Burridge line, because again, I love that line.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I know we talked about like the Fitz and Shrewd conversation a lot, so I at least know we got through that part.
Yeah, I think we got through
And
Fitz and Shrewd, Fitz and Molly, but then the Fitz and Shade we didn't discuss. Yeah.
I thought we still had, I think you still had like a couple things to say about Molly, and we paused there.
Me or me or Leah?
I don't have anything to say about Molly anymore.
I thought.
Yeah, I think I think mine was just a TLDR of like I feel like they both berate each other for not being pragmatic enough, but they don't have like the empathy to see why it is that way for the other. But also, it's like, what do you call it? It's unbalanced because Fitz doesn't give Molly enough information for her to reasonably have that level of empathy. So on her end, it's a lot more excusable than it is for Fitz, who by all rights should really be more mindful of her situation, especially since Patience is like spoon-fed it to him this entire book.
Yeah.
I do think it's unfair the level of pressure Molly puts on him to like choose her over his entire family. Like, I get where she's coming from. It's a very like absolute mindset of like this or this. And like, you should choose me because like you're not getting anything from them. But he's pulled in so many different directions. Like Night Eyes constantly wants him to run away from home. Molly constantly wants him to run away from home. And like, but he's been ingrained with this sense of loyalty and like possibly like with the skill too. I can't remember what the phrase is, but whatever Shrewd did to him when he was little that like made him be super loyal. Like, I feel bad for him. He's obviously handling it all wrong, but I still feel bad for him.
Well, I think, and also like in addition to that, he has seen kind of firsthand how bad everything can be with the Raiders. Like he was on the ship when they attacked that one place and he like had to go there. And then he's seen how bad like the forged ones can get, and they're like created by the Red Ship Raiders. So it kind of makes sense why he's like, I can't leave them and just run away. Like the problem's not going to go away if I go.
He's a true, even though he's not always the best, he is a true monarch in that sense, where he feels that sense of duty to his people in the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that's anything that Molly would ever be able to understand. Because maybe she feels like like the kingdom hasn't done anything good for her, so why does she owe it any loyalty?
Mhm. Or maybe
I
even more
think
than that,
she
like
understands.
how does one person change the fate of a kingdom is like her thing, right? Where it's like
Well, the fool
you're
thinks
putting
he
too much
can do
pressure on
it.
yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Molly. I don't. Does Molly even know the Fool exists?
I wonder
Do they
if the fool
ever
came
I
to
don't
introduce?
Molly.
know. She
Because the fool talks to everybody
I
else.
honestly
she
feel like,
must.
yeah. Why does like there's this one part where like the Fool is like, is Molly pregnant to Fitz, and it's like, why wouldn't the Fool go talk to Molly directly? Like, yeah.
I think that Fitz would give probably a more honest answer.
Oh yeah, it would be incapable of lying.
And
Classic Fitz moment.
I think the fool needs Fitz to know that there's like Fitz needs this ingrained in him that Molly can get pregnant from what they're doing, so he needs to be more responsible. Because clearly, Patience asking him like or giving him little subtle things is not enough. So I think the fool outright coming and being like, "Is your girlfriend carrying a baby?" is kind of enough to stop him in his tracks, at least for like a 1 minute.
Yeah, earlier Fitz is like, oh no. Anyways,
Yeah.
like
Right.
he like ponders it for one, like, man, it really sucks to be a woman and have sex. Anyways, I guess I just need to get on with the rest of my life and not like ponder the implication of this or apply any like introspection to the rest of my life. Cool.
Yeah.
I think Molly's just too immature at this point to understand it because I don't remember if we said spoilers all
Oh
yet,
yeah, I
but
forgot about
spoilers
that.
all. I'm about to say a spoiler. Say it, but I think she gets it like towards the end when they are like that chunk of time between the end of Tawny Man and beginning of Fitz and the Fool where they're living together because he mentions like he goes to Buckkeep to do like business things or royal things or he goes on a trip to the mountains or he's like she is has the capacity to understand that he has a sense of responsibility to his family, but they're both like 30 years older at that point, so it makes sense.
And I feel like Molly being with Burrich can kind of tell that loyalty to the kingdom too, because I'm sure he talked about chivalry and like everything there. And then, she sees how he does like drops everything for Fitz.
Definitely.
Yeah, and like later on there's like the direct parallel where she's like, hey, you're just as stupid as Burrich, and it's like, yeah. The
Yep.
and it ends up just being that like in the end Burrich is the one who's able to, because his ties to the monarchy, which are, I guess, like his loyalty was never to like the kingdom but to the people who ran it. And with chivalry and Fitz out of the way, it's sort of like, yeah,
There's
I
nothing
love these
left for
people.
me.
Right.
I guess, and the shade conversation also kind of touches on this whole like underlying current of like where is Fitz and Molly's relationship going, and like I feel like Shade demonstrates like unusual emotional intelligence in this section where he's like, what does Molly need? And I'm like, is this the same character who like at the beginning of this book was like, look, I knew that like Verity was getting married, but I didn't realize that mean we'd have a queen here. Like, come on. Like,
I think Kettrick's rubbing off
how is
on
it?
him.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed from this
Yeah, like
section with Shade. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna be like, Shade just has like a bunch of like really poignant lines throughout this entire section, and like
Yeah.
lines which have like subtle to not so subtle foreshadowing for later books if you're coming back and reading them.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I was going to point out is kind of the comparison that I made, at least, between Shrewd and his two wives and Fitz and his two kind of like options right now. Because Shade was talking
Yeah.
about how Constance, like Shrewd marrying Constance, was kind of a marriage of politics and it was just kind of what needed to be done. But it turned into like a deeper love than Shrewd had ever imagined possible. And then Queen Desire was a marriage of like passion and he chose her. And then that turned out to be like the worst mistake he could ever make in his life because she made Regal. But it's kind of like, it made me think, I wonder if like Fitz and Celerity could have had that deep love that Shrewd and Constance had, even though it would have been a marriage out of politics. Like, I think that they could have made each other really happy. And like, I stand by that. Like, I am low key shipping Fitz and Celerity, and like, I'm not even mad about it. Like, I love Molly as her own independent being, but I kind of want Fitz to be with Celerity because I think that I like her a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that
As
she
much
could
as
have like,
Shrewd is,
she could have done some good for Fitz.
yeah, like as much as Shrewd is like manipulative or like a puppet master or whatever, like that is one thing that he gets right. He's like, I'm trying to do right by you. Like Celerity would be like a good match for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like they seem to have like, they have like sort of like similar interests when you get down to it, and they would actually be able to make a life together. Like Fitz is just like refusing to like, until like the people in his life like push him to like the breaking point, he refuses to consider like the future.
Yeah.
Which makes him, he's a perfect wolf, but he's trying to live a wolf's life as a human. And that just
Speaking
doesn't fly.
of wolves and Celerity, in I think it was like chapter 20 or 21, I noted that the Farseers are wolves, and then Duke Brondy and like the people of Burns are all hawks, because Hobb describes them as like his hawk eyes like looked at me, or his hawk like children, like they had short hair and they like moved like birds. And then all of the Farseers are always described as like wolves or like wolfish.
Interesting.
So I guess we've got all the animals.
I never picked up on that.
All the animal kingdom.
But hawks don't like it.
Yeah, but Celerity seems to like him all right.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, he was being way too warm and like sharing way too much. And that's what the hawks didn't like about him, but like it made the girl hawk like him.
This is a deep cut analysis. I love this. Oh yeah, so I guess going back to like the Shade conversation, one line I noted is, "Does anything feel worse than being angry with the people you love?" And Shade responds, "Watching someone you love die and being angry but not knowing where to direct it," which is presumably talking about Shrewd, because he's like, has to watch Shrewd wither away, and I'm sure that like Shade has like misgivings of his own about Regal, but it comes down to like he has to maintain that unshakable faith. Especially, I think that like he's probably not putting on, but he's probably being stronger than he truly is in front of Fitz, to make sure that like to like sort of reinforce his own convictions that way. And it's just like, yeah. I also wonder, like, has Shade had to like watch anyone else he loved die in his life? Because I feel like there's not many other people he's close to, and this feels like a very like pointed line. So.
Well, like his mom died. Yeah.
His mother.
I think that's the only
fair.
That's the only thing that I think is similar.
I'm sure it was hard because he says he was close to Chivalry and Verity when they were young. So I'm sure it was hard to like deal with Chivalry dying. But he didn't have to watch him die by any means.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess like the being angry and not knowing where to direct it could also be about like the accident that like scarred his face, where it's just like there's no one to blame for that, but like it still ruined his entire life.
He made it ruin his entire life. He's just dramatic.
I mean,
didn't have to ruin his life.
He was like, "Oh, I am ugly. Don't show my face to the rest of them." Meanwhile, he comes back out at age 65 and is apparently the hottest thing around.
I know.
Like, come on now. Oh yeah, and like the big foreshadowing line. Sometimes it is easier to pull a knife out of a man than to ask him to forget words you have uttered. which is like, I don't know if I like, this is the thing where like, I don't know if this is intentional on Hobbs' part, because it's like so esoteric, and it's like, but it's so pointed, like when you're coming back and reading it, where it's like, yeah, okay, that's obviously like referring to what happens at the end of the first Fitz and the Fool book, where like he literally stabs the Fool, and like that's easier to forgive than the argument that they had during Tawny Man and all the animosity from that.
It also reminded me of the argument that, or like the way that Fitz acts towards Shade and Burrich at the beginning of Assassin's Quest, when they like want him to be responsible and he just wants to be a wolf, and he gets super mad and he says something really mean to Burrich. I can't remember exactly what he says, but it's something about like you never lived your own life or did anything for yourself. You were just like a dog. And that like kind of damages, those words are really damaging to their relationship, more so than if they like accidentally physically hurt each other.
Yeah, like I think the only reason I don't remember that is because I don't want to remember. Like I don't remember the specifics.
Yeah, that
I
would
don't
hurt
want
my
to
heart.
It's a really fun.
He's really mean to Shade and Burrich in that part. Like I remember when last time I was reading it, I was listening to the audiobook in the car and I was like visibly cringing, being like, "Don't be so mean to your dads.
Yeah.
They just brought you back to life."
And something that really touched my heart was in, I think it was probably chapter 20 also, or 21, when, I think it's 21, when Fitz is really looking at Shade and he kind of really sees him for who he is, and he's like, underneath like being an assassin and all this, like Shade is such a gentle man, and then like he goes and like beats up Shade like with his words later on, and it hurts even more.
I know.
I was trying to think of like what feeling that scene evokes, and then I realized it reminds me a lot of the scene from the last book of Harry Potter, where like they're all at like Grimmauld Palace, like Grimmauld Place, like halfway through the book, and then Lupin like strolls up, like, "Hey guys, I want to join you," and then Harry gets like super pissed at him for abandoning his wife and kid, and like he says some like, he's like, "Yeah, I guess you're just abandoning them. You're exactly like you're being exactly like my dad or something, or like would my dad be proud of you for doing this?" And it's like these really like hateful words, but in that situation it's like something that he needed to hear, while
They're
here it's just completely
necessary.
unnecessary. Yeah,
Here,
but like it had that same
Yeah.
it had the same feeling of like, no, don't fight, you guys are supposed to love each other.
Don't be mean to each other.
Yeah. Don't say mean words to one of your father figures. And another line that stood out to me was, sometimes it would be much easier to die for one's king than give one's life to him. Which, first of all, Shade and Hobb are really going in with the sometimes, as though that isn't also foreshadowing. But again, this is like, this feels to me like, it applies to so many moments in the series, but like the one that struck out most to me is Assassin's Quest, where like Fitz is ready and willing to go to the dragon, and Verity's like, actually, instead, would you stay alive and fuck my wife, by the way? And it's just like, and yeah.
He doesn't use those exact words, but that's what we get from it.
Yeah, he doesn't use his words
That's
at all,
the
to be
intention.
fair. He doesn't tell Fitz what's going to happen. He's just like, "Oh, okay, you understand the cost?" And Fitz is like, "Yes." And Verity's like, "Cool. This definitely isn't a parallel to another time I thought that you knew what was going to happen, and then I totally messed up your life. Cool. Let's go for it."
He really doesn't double check
It
enough.
also, no, he doesn't. It also reminds me of like at the end or in the beginning of Assassin's Quest, Fitz is so pissed that Burrich and Shade like brought him back. Like he pretty much would rather be dead. And it's like he really would rather have died than like be alive again and have to still serve the royal family.
Yeah, he wants his own life, and that's not a possibility for him.
No.
Okay, that's all I have for chapter 17. Do you guys have anything more to say?
Mm-mm.
I don't.
Okay. So our first new chapter of this episode is a pivotal one. It's called Elderlings, and that's because this is the chapter in which Ketrican floats the plan of going to retrace King Wisdom's footsteps and call on the Elderlings for aid. Verity takes to this plan, and after seeking permission from King Shrewd, Verity does eventually, essentially, finalize the deal and says, "Okay, I'm going to go out and seek the Elderlings." And yeah, I think this is like, I feel like most of this book can be separated into like pre-Verity leaving and post-Verity leaving, because it's such like a drastic shift. Because Verity is like the last real obstacle in Regal's way, and without him there's no oversight, and everyone who has the capacity to act just can't. And it reminds me of that line from like The Fool. We're like something. It was something about like we're powerless to act now, so that we can be powerful later. And it's like, yeah, just like everyone has their hands tied by like just some of their values, and Regal has no values, so he's running amok.
Yeah, Regal sucks, and he just keeps getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
That's just
redemption
a tagline for the
Regal.
entire series.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, one thing that like really struck me, or like it strikes me every time I read these books, is the little story in the intro about like the ship Revenge, where like it goes out. It's supposed to be like this first ship that actually like takes the war to the to like the out islanders, and then it turns out it just gets captured. And it's like I think it's one of those things where like it really sets up that feeling of helplessness that Verity must have, and like contextualizes like, okay, this is why he's at his breaking point and looking for any solutions.
Well, did it get captured, or did they desert?
I thought they like
That's
deserted.
what I thought too.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Because if it, I
Okay,
think if they got captured, they would have, like, the Revenge would have started raiding
And for
like the Six Duchies. But I think that they deserted, and they started, maybe they like hung out in the Pirate Isles and decided to be pirates instead.
okay,
yeah, it said they were sighted
Further
like,
south.
hanging out in the pirate island.
then
Right.
that's even worse then. Like
Yeah, I
your
felt
own
really
people
bad for
going
Verity.
AWOL. Yeah.
I think it was that
Right.
moment that really like made Verity decide that he's got to be the sacrifice, and like he needs to be the one to step up and just help his kingdom, because sitting and skilling isn't going to do it.
I have just been dreading Verity leaving. It gets so much more stressful once he leaves. You want to like jump into the book and scream in Shrewd's face.
Scream in Shade's face, because Shade is at least like abled at this point.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and Shrewd is like willingly fogging himself because he doesn't want to deal with pain, which I get because pain sucks, but like at the detriment to all of the people that live in your kingdom, like suck it up.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also one of those things where like he's doing it to himself, and Shade is doing it to him, and Wallace is doing it to him, and it's like all of these forces are conspiring to like not only like take him away from his pain, but also in Wallace's case, there's this imbalance of like also trying to make him like senile, and like Shade is kind of just like, well, whatever makes him less pained, I guess.
Shade's just like letting it happen.
I think the worst
I think
thing
that like
about it
It's really
is when we see when like Shrewd starts skilling again, and we kind of see that he's still in there, but he's just as trapped as everybody else is. Like everybody else is trapped kind of like not physically, but they're trapped by like society and like the norms, so they can't just go off and kill the prince. But Shrewd is trapped in his aging body. Like he can't, there's nothing that he can do to even try and get around it.
Yeah, I put like all of it entirely on Shade's doorstep, and I guess I'll talk more about that when we actually get to chapter 20. But like, God, I think I can understand everyone else's reasons for not dealing with Regal, but like Shades are the ones where I'm like, you dropped the ball.
For someone that's so smart, he's just like so unwilling to act autonomously, which is funny because when you get to like the Fitz and the Fool, before he kind of starts to lose his marbles, he's like acting autonomously too much, where Kettricken and Dutiful are like trying to reel him back in because they're like, we don't need your help as much, like we've got this, we can take care of things.
I wonder also if it's got to do with like Shade can't do anything to Regal because he knows that like there's a strong possibility that Verity won't be coming back, and he thinks like if Regal's gone too, then like everything will just go to shit because there's not going to be really an heir to the throne. So like, who's gonna run the kingdom?
That's
Right.
that's a fair thought, and
Like,
one that
I
I
feel like
wish
that's the
like
only
if
reason.
if Shade like brought that up explicitly, I feel like that would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, he should have for sure.
But then as soon as Kettricken is showing signs of pregnancy, then you go and you're like, okay, murder time.
Time to kill Regal.
Easy.
I can't wait till we get to see Small Ferret eat Regal.
Let's go, Small Ferret. See, I don't think like I put together that it was Small Ferret that actually did the deed. Like till years later, till I think I listened to Buckkeep Radio, because like they just
I didn't either.
I thought it was
Right.
just like Fitz and like Night Eyes or like some sort of like wolf slashing
No,
thing.
I knew.
Yeah.
I thought it was Slink, and then rereading, I was like, oh wait, Slink's dead. And then I figured it out, and I mentioned it to my mom. I was like, do you remember, because she read the Farseer trilogy, and I was like, did you know that the ferret that warns him is the ferret that kills Regal? And she was like, duh.
Yeah, he's so mad. He hates Regal so much, you guys.
See, okay, I was like,
I
oh,
think
okay,
I
at
just
least
forgot about
Fitz
him
gets
by the
like,
time I got
even
there.
though Fitz doesn't get to publicly come out and like be like, Regal framed me. I thought that I was like, Fitz gets to have his like private bloody revenge, is what I thought. And then on read, I'm like, no, Fitz gets nothing, nothing.
Somebody else gets their
He
private
really
bloody
gets
revenge.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Small Ferret definitely does deserve it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a line that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one thing that I kind of picked out from this chapter is I'm just impressed with Kettricken that it seems like she has this kind of bond with Shrewd, and she likely knows that Shrewd ordered Rurisk's death. And I don't know, I'd just be holding a grudge so bad that I wouldn't even be able to look at him. And she's like, kind of sets that aside because she knows she needs to have a good relationship with him as like the king, and she's gonna be sacrifice.
Yeah.
So
Kettricken is always having to be the bigger woman, like forgiving Fitz,
really is.
Like having to sort of forgive Regal, having to forgive Shrewd, and like she takes on so much of the Six Duchies as her own, despite how awful they treat her.
Yeah.
Like actual saint.
Mm-hmm.
Truly. Yeah, she's the best.
One line that she says, which I thought was pretty interesting, she's talking about, I think, King Wisdom. And she's saying that men of passion and vision are often seen as mad. And I thought this was interesting because it also very much applies to the Fool and how everyone ends up treating him later on, where it's just this, like, the Fool, I think, has the greatest vision out of anyone in this series, just for the world. And like that same vision is what makes people doubt them completely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also interesting because like in that moment, the fool is the one bringing up the idea of the Elderlings to Ketrican, and who starts this whole domino chain. So it's sort of like it feels like yes, the fool is the, even though she's explicitly talking about King Wisdom, there's sort of like this undercurrent of like, yeah, the fool is the person of like with ambition who's setting this whole plan into motion, and who's been dismissed as crazy by every one of the Farseers because none of them listened to him until Ketrican. Which, like, there's a line where it's like, perhaps Verity and I were the ones who were short-sighted. And I'm like, yes, you Farseers are the stupidest bunch around. And again, reinforces my like theory that like if the Farseer name did come back in time, then it's totally ironic. And it's like, look at these bozos. Like,
Yeah, I made note of that line too, because it's exactly what the fool is trying to tell Fitz in his little song. Because they are definitely not true to their name. They only see what's directly in front of them or like handed to them on a little platter.
mm-hmm.
Or even when they are looking ahead, it's out of like paranoia and not like good thinking skills.
Yeah. It's not how can I better the world, it's what the fuck's gonna happen to my kingdom now, like how can I protect the royal family and all of that.
Like even when, I don't think it's this chapter, I think it's like a later chapter, but when Verity and Shrewd are skilling and Shrewd's like, Brondy's a traitor, blah blah blah, and we can't trust Ketrican anymore. Like, he is trying to think ahead, but he's thinking ahead wrong. He's just like listening to everything that Regal says and allowing Regal to feed into his own like paranoia about losing any semblance of power for the Farseer line. It's less about like, how do we protect our people, and more about like, we can't let these duchies get out of control.
And I think it's easier to like be suspicious of a foreign queen than it is to be suspicious of your own son who's like coming in and pretending to be this like angelic person who takes care of you.
Definitely.
And like the thing is, why would Shrewd listen to Regal and Regal's spies and not go to the source and ask his own spy what's going on? Like, Shade definitely would have more information and be much more trustworthy than his son.
I know. There was like, I think I had it in my reading notes like 3 times, and I like limited it when I put my notes in our doc because I was like, you're repeating yourself. But there were so many times where I was like, I don't understand why Shrewd is listening to Regal. Like, I want to just shake him. It's like, you're supposed to be shrewd. Instead, you're just being an idiot.
I think it might be because Regal's probably the only one who's not he doesn't have a ton of duties besides like partying and like having a great time. So he's got the most free time to go and visit Shrewd. He also has Wallace set up like a little barricade, so it's harder for everyone else to go and see him. So like Regal kind of has his grips in him, and if Regal's the only person that Shrewd's been talking to and like seeing on a daily basis, and he's kind of like losing it a little bit because of all of the like smoke and like painkillers, it kind of makes sense why like he might be more trustworthy of Regal than anybody else, just because Regal's there like repeating himself every day, like this is bad, this is what my spies are saying, and then no one else has come up to kind of like refute anything that he's saying.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I feel like I would be more sympathetic if Shrewd hadn't witnessed and acknowledged Regal being a shitty traitor in the last book. It's like, you've already seen this behavior and you're just like willfully like, well, I talked to him about it, so it'll never happen again.
Like,
It's like,
okay.
A leopard doesn't change its spots. Regal's shitty, and he'll always be shitty.
That's true.
One thought I had with regard to Regal is, like, the Fool keeps talking about how the world needs a Farseer heir. It doesn't particularly seem to care about like where that heir comes from. It could be Fitz himself, it could be Fitz's child, it could be Ketrican's child. And I'm thinking about like, why can't it be Regal? And I almost wonder if like Galen wasn't the only bastard, which like there's also evidence, there's plenty of evidence to refute this, because like he mentioned, like Fitz mentions looking similar to Regal, etc., etc. But I'm like, if the Fool is so insistent on there being a Farseer here, why does Regal just like not count in that list? And it could just be like, well, you see, Regal is a shitty person, but like I don't know, that always bugged me for some reason.
Is there any evidence that Regal would be interested in the sex necessary to create another heir?
I mean, he is pretty flirty with like anyone and everyone once he gets in his smokes. He's like isn't he like around with some ladies all the time? Like there's one time I think in like the end of like the first book where like he's like behind a curtain and it's implied that like he's like boning someone, and like the guard is like, he's currently occupied, I'm going to give you the orders now.
I don't remember that part. I always thought he was a very like queer-coded villain with his obsession with like clothes and fashion and hair and his little posse of like boys around him, like.
Oh yeah,
Hobb
and they
is
definitely
my
like
little
they're like, Regal was
Oh,
clean shaven while Verity had a beard, and it's just like, okay, yeah. They
It reminds me of like queer-coded Disney villains.
Oh yeah, exactly.
The Fool also says something about Regal in the section where he asks Fitz if he like made a baby, and I can't remember where it is. He says something about
I
Regal.
don't have my book down.
I think it is that like Regal would like go after the child, is what I thought it was. Let me check.
I thought it was like Regal's been careful, or like he's only done flirting lately. Okay, he says because the Fool is like, because it is easier to ask of you than to ask Ketrican if she carries Verity's child. As far as I can determine, Regal has shared his favors only with himself of late. So that dismisses him. Which means Regal's not getting any action, and he's not going to have any kids.
Okay.
Yeah. Regal's like a not buff Gaston.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that.
I also wonder if it's like maybe in every future where it's only Regal just dies, and that's why like he doesn't really count as a Farseer heir, because like
he doesn't continue the line.
Mm-hmm. He has no survival skills.
Yeah, I think he's too dumb to like think about the future outside of his own lifespan. So even if he was like king, I can't see him being like, I need to get married and produce an heir. He'd just be like, let's make a war on Chalced.
Yeah, let's get some more for my kingdom. Let's expand the kingdom.
War with Chalced? Nah, he would start the slave trade with Chalced. He would be like, well,
oh my god, yeah.
You know,
yeah, that's true.
Servants are so expensive.
He would make the 6 duchies into Bingtown before Bingtown did its whole thing, you know. We were subtly introducing the slave trade into our society and trying to normalize it before it was cool. Thanks. I guess in the middle of this chapter, there's like this whole thing where Fitz goes to visit Patience, and Patience is like, hey, do you know this plant? Yeah, you know, it's commonly taken by women trying not to get pregnant. Does that mean anything to you, Fitz? And Fitz, why are you not complaining about not being able to be with Molly? And it's like, it feels like Patience has definitely sussed out that, like, they're banging, but, like, I feel like she doesn't have that same intensity or like kind of like Fitz, you need to get your shit together as at the start of the book, and that confuses me because I feel like if anything, this would make her go like even crazier. Like, Fitz, are you crazy? I told you to stay away from her this whole time, and now you're taking so many unnecessary risks. Or maybe it's because she doesn't like know for sure. She's just like speculating, but also like it feels like she knows.
I think it's probably just one of those things, like, as a mom, you kind of just have to accept that your kids are gonna make their own mistakes, and you just have to let them make those mistakes and, like, deal with the consequences after as, like, a learning experience. Because I feel like the harder that she tries to keep them apart, it just makes Fitz cling on to her even more and want her even more. So she's kind of just gotta be like, "Do what you wanna do, and we'll see what happens then."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just like I feel like patience is
Especially
like the epitome of stubborn. So like I would get that with anyone else, but I'm like, patience? Really? Giving up?
I don't know, I think she's smart. I think she knows when to pick her battles, I think.
Hmm.
And she probably,
That could
like,
be true.
she knows that Fitz is almost or just as stubborn as Chivalry, so she knows, like, when she's gonna lose, and she kind of accepts it because she knows that Fitz is gonna get taught his lesson anyways. So she doesn't have to fight and use all of her energy trying to teach him the lesson that he's gonna have to learn regardless. Like, life will teach him that lesson.
One part that you noted as well, Alex, is um, Fitz being about Molly is like, wow, she didn't skill, she had no wit, but she had like her own
Imagine
magic,
her own.
which like he's being so melodramatic, but also she totally has the wit. You're just so not perceptive at all.
Yeah, I don't know how he doesn't see it. And, like, her own magic is definitely just her using the wit. If that's what if he feels like it is magic, it's like it's their connection through the wit.
yeah, that part felt a little bit jarring to me because it seemed so like
Obvious.
wrong. Right.
I think Fitz just wants to think of Molly as perfect, and if she has the wit just based on, like, what Birch ingrained in him, then she's not this, like, perfect person because, like, having the wit makes you kind of flawed. Or, like, maybe he's scared to acknowledge that she has the wit because he doesn't want her to know, and he doesn't want other people to know that she's witted just for her own safety.
That's what I think it is because I know I've mentioned this before and we've talked about it before, but he's so much of a like he'll just lie to himself like and be completely convinced. And I think he doesn't want Molly to have the wit for whatever reason because he like is struggling with accepting it in himself or within himself and he's been trained to think it's bad. So he's just like, "No, Molly doesn't have the wit." It's like, "Okay,
We all know she
sure."
does, but okay.
Yeah,
Like obviously it's not like Fitz's wit, but she and maybe Molly doesn't even realize. But it's something.
mm-hmm.
I feel like she kind of has to realize a little bit, or at least she realizes it later on in the, like, other trilogies, but I feel like her working with bees in the past, she had to kind of realize that she's got a way with the bees at least, and, like, a way that she can
And I
kind of
I almost
tame
think that
them
like the wit
maybe.
is like the wit is like what drew her and Fitz together because they have like this like nonverbal
Inexplicable
communication. Yeah,
bond.
exactly. They
Yeah,
which like I don't remember
I
if
could
this
see
book or the
that.
last one, but like they have like a lot of description about like yeah, we just vibed with each other. And it's like at the time you're like, "Oh yeah, they just vibed." And it's like but then you go back and like the exact descriptions are like, "Yeah, I felt her emotion just somehow." And it's like, huh, "Yeah, just somehow, huh?" Weird, wild how that happens.
Yeah.
I guess I don't really have much to say about this chapter other than that. Just like, man, the whole Elderling quest thing happened so fast. I guess the other thing is, oh my god, finally, Ketrican and Verity get it on. Because, like, they've been pining after each other for, like, chapters or, like, this entire book. And it's like, thank god, finally, get it.
Yeah, my only other note for this was it is so awkward that Fitz is getting a taste of his own medicine with Verity and Ketrican.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I read this, I was so like bewildered because he's owning Molly, and then all of a sudden it says something about her blonde hair, and I was like, wait, I thought Molly had black hair. And it wasn't until like as Fitz is kind of realizing that I realized as a reader, and I was like, awkward.
Yeah, it comes back to like what you guys talked about with like how she just like integrates this perspective so well, where it's like when Fitz was drugged earlier, or like in the first book when he's just like hanging out with Nosy, she makes it like so difficult to like pull yourself away from that character's perspective in like a good way.
Yeah, we're in Fitz's head, so we can't see like logically what's going on. We just see like what he's going on and what he's thinking.
Yeah, she's really a master at that. Like, I love her other books too. Like, I love the Live Ships and Rain Wilds. But I think the reason that I don't love them quite as much is that we don't get that first person like immersion that you get with these books. Like, I feel like I know Fitz and the characters around Fitz a lot better than I know Live Ship characters, just because you're in their head a little bit, like it's third person, but you're getting like these kind of POV switches, but it's not as like you're not in their head like you are with Fitz.
It's not like full immersion into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
First time reader being like, dude was traumatized. He has nothing. Like, I cannot tell you like how much like this whole like the whole, and also just like the whole like, well, I guess Fitz like made Ketrican pregnant, and like his like lifelong love is gone. Like that just like the first time I read the last book, I was like, I have the wrong copy. There's something wrong. Like this is a parody. This is a fan fiction. But I think it's
I remember being worried because I was worried that because it's like we'll have one last night together and then she'll be pregnant and she can have my heir. And it's like I took a biology of sex class in college, and it is very difficult to get pregnant. Like Verity just assuming like they can just bang one time and then Ketrican will immediately have an heir is, I mean, obviously it works out, but I was stressed out. I was like, she's not gonna get pregnant. There are so little.
I bet he skill commands the sperm to like find the egg. Have my heir.
I wonder if that's possible.
I could see him doing that.
Guiding the sperm to the egg.
Though honestly, like given how much they make it sound like that the skill like absorbs all other like human like interests, I feel like the skill would just be like a spermicide.
Yeah,
like, that's like
Yeah, or maybe like just
well, that's
if that was the purpose of it, he could like skill ingrain that purpose into the deed.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think that's also why like
result in a pregnancy.
that's why he uses Fitz's body, because his body's like, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. And so he's like, I need a new young body, a teenage horny body.
Oh man.
I think the last note that I have in this chapter is like, I just kind of feel really bad for Verity because he must feel so conflicted about leaving Buckkeep. Like, on the one hand, he's got to do this. Like, he's a sacrifice. He feels like this is something that he needs to do in order to save his kingdom. But on the other hand, it's so dangerous to leave the kingdom in the hands that it's in right now. Like, with his treacherous ass brother, is like ailing, dying father, and then his queen, who like people might still see as a foreigner and not really trust all the way. So like he knows that he's leaving his sneaky snake brother drooling over the crown while he goes. Like nobody is safe when Verity leaves.
He also, like, I think I have this in my notes for the beginning of 19, but it kind of bleeds into the end of this chapter too. But it's like really sad for Verity and for Ketrican that they don't really connect until this like 1 week before Verity leaves. So they really only have like 1 week together in like wedded bliss or whatever. And that's all they'll get for the rest of their lives. And like we know that Ketrican never has that again, and she lives like a full
It's
life.
because she wants Fitz and he doesn't realize.
It's really, I feel really bad for her. I feel bad for every character in this book. I know I say that about everybody, but it's sad.
Everyone's got a hard life. Like nobody has it nice and easy where they can just kind of coast by and live the best life. Like Hobb makes them all suffer.
Right.
They all suffer equally.
Yeah, Hobb is like, you know what? Real life is pain and suffering. And it's just like, sometimes you can give them good things as a treat. You know that, right?
We're not escaping into this book. No escapism here.
Okay, are we good to move on to chapter 19, or do we have more notes for this one?
No, I think chapter 19 is calling.
I'm good.
Okay, it's leaving us a message because its name is Messages, and I'm really good at transitions. Okay, so this is the first chapter where Verity is gone, and like frame 1, Regal is screwing stuff up. And this time it's by essentially taking the skill network and being like, well, actually, they're not working. They don't know why. And this leads to a massive red ship raid on Burns, on Ferry, being like on essentially like the warnings that were supposed to arrive don't, and so they get overwhelmed. And this is sort of like the start of Regal's plan to just be like, what if we were the 3 duchies instead of the 6 duchies?
The Mountain Kingdom being the 3 duchies, the 3rd duchy.
Right, the 3rd duchy, yeah. This part was so frustrating. Like, I was seething. I'm just like, I hate... Regal's such a dick. Like, he just does not care at all about Ferry being raided. He's just like,
Yeah, Regal sucks ass.
Oh, well.
Yeah, and my thing is, like, I feel like I was talking with this with Julia. For those of you who didn't see that was my friend who joined us for the live show, where it's like, it feels like Regal is like not that good of a manipulator, but like he put 1 point into manipulation where everyone else has like a 0 score, so he's constantly beating them out by virtue of just like being better than they are. Yeah. And it's just like, especially when like he's doing like this whole like Schrodinger's treasury thing where he's like, we don't have the money to feed you, but I have money to throw these amazing feasts. Don't look too deep into it. And it's like, there's nobody else. Like, maybe only the people in the castle know that Regal is, like, splurging heavy. But, like, how he can't do this thing where he's like, well, the treasury's empty when I want it to be. But don't ask where I get the money for any of the things I do.
And you know that the servants talk, so they must talk to their families who don't live like in the kingdom and then, or like in the castle, and then everybody else kind of finds out. Right. So like everyone knows that Regal, or that the king, like the royal family is broke, allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
And that they kind of just don't
he just spins it as like, it's all Verity's fault.
Yeah. If Verity didn't go on this quest that I really encouraged him to go on, everything would be fine.
Yeah, there's literally the point where, like, in front of Shrewd, Fitz is like, didn't you want Verity to go on the quest? And Regal's like, I forgot. He's just like, yeah, like, I have no excuse for this, so let's just Move along.
I think the common people are just losing faith in the Farseers as a whole, and they're not discriminating between Verity or Shrewd or Regal.
Yeah.
Because we kind of see Molly being like, everything is going to collapse and everyone's going to die and the Raiders are going to take over, so we should just run away. Like, she just has no... And she lives in the castle, so she sees that, like, they're just having parties and raids are happening and whatever.
I think the, like, kingdom's doubt of the Farseers came first with Verity because they didn't understand the skilling, so they just thought that he was kind of hiding away while the red ships were, like, raiding their towns.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of just continued once he left because they're like, oh yeah, he's going on this, like, fool's errand of a quest. And then it just, like Regal is kind of less bad in their eyes just because he's like, at least he's still here.
He's there invisible.
And yeah, and to like Pharaoh and Tilt, it's just like, well, you're showering us with so many great things, so obviously you must be amazing.
Yeah.
Like, even at the start of this book, when they're like coming back from the Mountain Kingdom, there's already like the insidious seeds of like, Ketrican is an evil foreigner, and Regal is so princely, and is
and
the best
Verity's
thing to
not
come
doing
out of
anything.
Buckkeep ever. Mm-hmm. I guess the other thing I noted was like Fitz like catching feelings for Ketrican through like Verity's skill link, and then Night Eyes being like, "Danger! This is Leader's mate, not your mate." And it's like it's surreal to like see Night Eyes like this, given like how I feel like his opinion changes later on, but also,
I think that like he sees how much respect and love that Fitz has for Verity, so he's just trying to like save Fitz from kind of the shame that it would bring him, or like the pain that it would bring him, like cheating with his uncle's wife or something. And then later on, once Verity's dead, he's like, yeah, I love her, like, pick her. She's the one.
But yeah, I think that was the extent of my notes for this chapter. I didn't really have much to say, but I think it's also because I was just kind of like in like a red haze this entire chapter, just being like, Regal, you asshole.
I think my only other note was, for some reason, every time I'm a little bit surprised that Verity doesn't try to take Fitz with him. Because he takes, like, it just seems like he would. And I know he kind of leaves him so that Ketrican has somebody, and he can kind of be like Verity's eyes. Mm-hmm. But if I were Fitz, I would want to go with Verity. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised that Fitz doesn't, like, push for it, or that Verity doesn't consider it.
Well, I think that Verity does, but then he's like, yeah, it's not safe. Like, Ketrican would 100% get murdered if Fitz wasn't there, kind of like as the scapegoat almost. Oh, yeah. And then, I don't know why Fitz doesn't think, like, I should go on this quest with them. He's just like, I'm staying home. Like, this is a fool's errand. But, like...
Yeah, I guess Molly probably has something to do with it, too. Mm. He wants to be with Molly, but I'm sure everything would have turned out worse if Fitz had gone with, but, like, I kind of would like to see, like, the alternate, the AU where he does, and just see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so wait, how would things change? So, Verity has no way of knowing what's going on back in Buckkeep. I don't know how that changes anything. The main thing would be like they would just kill the king, and Regal's entire thing would go off without a hitch. So it feels like it would be like a lot more like
Ketrican.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Ketrican would die. And then they probably, like, because they attack Verity and everybody, and Verity makes it out alive and Burrich makes it out alive, but like I don't think anyone else really does.
I feel like
Not very
Night Eyes
many
would bite
people.
it. I feel like Night Eyes would bite it in that battle if he took Night Eyes along with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Night Eyes would be fighting to save Fitz, and he would be less cautious than he would be if it was just like trying to save his own skin.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like ultimately it's just like shit ends up worse, the timeline, and just like a lot more binary that way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think most of this chapter, this chapter and chapter 18, anytime Rosemary was mentioned, can somebody please warn Ketrican? Like, she sucks. Somebody. And then, like, there was a line, I think Ketrican is talking about King Shrewd, and she's like, he was like a child listening to his elders converse, nodding, but understanding little. And then she glances down fondly at Rosemary at her feet, and I'm like, no, don't like her. She sucks.
Well, okay.
She's evil.
She's not intentionally evil.
But she is. And she understands. Like, the thing is, like, she listens. So, does she understand everything that's being said, or is she just really good at parroting stuff back?
I think she's just repeating things.
And I think she understands like some of it, but she doesn't understand like the significance of like retelling it.
Yeah.
Like again, like there's we see how easy it is to just like frame it as a game, because like we get to see that exact thing through
Right.
Fitz's eyes.
Yeah.
And through, we see it again with Fitzvigilant in our Vigilant, not Vigilant. Fitzvigilant in Fool's Assassin when Shade makes him spy on B. He like doesn't really know what he's doing at all, but then Fitz goes nuts and scares the shit out of him.
I think it's kind of fun when Fitz like unleashes his rage. You never know what's gonna happen.
Me too. Like when I read that book and hadn't read anything else, I was like kind of afraid of Fitz. Even though it was from first person, I was like, this guy's scary when he gets mad.
Yeah, and like we see that in this section where like Fitz like is like goes to stand over Regal, and the fool is just like frozen in fear.
And Regal's scared too.
Yeah, he thinks he's.
Fitz can be scary.
It just like Fitz is just like an intimidating person, and it's like not he's got like that like physical presence going on, but it's also like the thing of like I feel like Fitz is the type of person who's like generally again like very go with the flow. So like when you make that kind of person like actually like proactively take action, it's like oh shit, how did we get to this point?
Well, I think also like Regal knows that Fitz is trained as an assassin, so like he knows that Fitz knows how to kill people and do it quietly. And then also like I'm sure that you can kind of see like that kind of wildness and like wolfishness in Fitz, like from Night Eyes, like what he kind of adapts into like himself. So like he's got this wild, like kind of scary, animalistic look in his eye, and then also he like knows how to kill you very quietly. So like, why are you pushing his buttons? Why are you tempting him to sneakily off you? What's going on?
Again, like I was thinking all this, and it just comes up to like Regal literally feels invincible because he's never been like no one has ever checked him in his entire life, except like Daddy-O the one time when he comes back to the mountains, and that's the equivalent of a slap on the wrist.
Like, not even. Like, the that's like telling him like, don't do that. He would Shrewd would never touch Regal in a harmful way ever.
He'd like scold him and then like cup his cheek and be like, "Are you okay, son? I'm sorry if that was too much.
Sorry, you know, I have to. They made me."
Yeah. Oh, God.
Have an extra pony. Like, you can keep this one. I made it especially for you because I feel so bad for how I treated you.
God. Here's control of the whole treasury.
You can have all of our money. Do with it what you want.
I trust you because you're my son. And Verity, Chivalry, not really. They don't count. They're the tools.
I think the last thing I have for this chapter is just I noticed so much how much more like princely Fitz has been acting lately. The way that he talks to people and kind of like has this air of authority. And I don't think that he realizes that he's doing it. And it's so dangerous for him. And I wish that somebody would tell him like that the subtle way he acts, like without knowing, is very dangerous and will catch the eye of Regal, and Regal's gonna be pissed and kill your ass.
I mean, like, everyone tells him at the start of the book. He just doesn't listen.
Yeah.
And like,
But like I
the
think
problem,
he
it doesn't
tries
just catch like.
I think he tries to listen at first
He-
and then he kind of just forgets.
He's just too honest. He's just too
Yeah.
much himself.
Yeah.
That
It's like such second nature that he doesn't even realize when he's doing
it's like
it.
that line that he says about being witted, but you can apply it to almost any part of his life. Where it's like, it was not a thing that I did, but it was just who I was.
Yeah. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, and it brings him into
James.
danger not just from Regal, but also like basically from Bronte, because like he becomes a game piece in like the political machinations of like the kingdom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it like borders, I think it is at more towards the end of this book, but it's like bordering on treason.
Mm-hmm.
And Shade is even like, what do we do with this?
And Fitz is like, I couldn't say no, and it's like, yeah, but you could have you could have not let it get to this point.
Right.
Okay, so is that all for chapter 19?
Yeah. At least for me.
It's all for me.
Okay, cool. We finally finished the chapters that we planned out for last
Episode 9 chapters are done.
Yay.
And it only took another hour and a half.
Yeah. As a treat.
These chapters are beefy.
There's so much going on and so much to pick through.
Yeah. Which is really interesting because when like when I used to think back on these chapters, I just remembered like the time after, like all of this time being like pre-Verity leaving, Verity leaves, and then the long calm before the storm, in which I'm just like, why don't they kill Regal? Why don't they kill Regal? Why don't they kill Regal? Oh, Regal killed Fitz. But it's like, she does a very good job of like actually subtly like slowly closing in.
Yeah.
Just like everything. Mm-hmm. Where it's like once you know the end point, obviously it feels like, oh duh, we were leading up here the entire time. But like, as I remember the first time reading experience is like, you know something's gonna fall apart, but you don't know how, because there's so many little you feel like the fool almost, where you're like, there's so many little threads that could be plucked.
Yeah,
I don't know which one is gonna
happen, but
go.
I don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and a lot of times things seem to be going well, or they have like a plan that seems like it's really going to work, to the point where even when you have read it before and you're rereading and you know how it turns out, you're like, oh, but this seems like so foolproof. How does this fall apart?
It's got to work this time.
Right.
It's like, I know that
It must work.
I know that Game of Thrones is like over referenced or over compared, but like it really does give me those vibes where it's like, I'm sure the wedding will go off without a hitch this time. I swear.
Maybe it'll be different this episode this time.
Mm-hmm.
These books are brutal, but at least we don't have any red
Yeah,
weddings.
thank God.
Yeah, the only like mass murder on that scale is committed by the protagonist against the antagonist. So like Fitz hunting down like all of the skill users.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, because Fitz is the only one suffering, he gets like the suffering of like 12 characters in one.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Poor Fitz. He goes through a lot. I'm dreading like reading further. I put this in my last, like this was the last note that I made, but like every time we get like closer to the end of the book, I'm like dreading it and I get like so nervous reading. I'm like, I don't want what's coming to come. Can't I just live where Fitz is
It's
happy
tough.
and somewhat safe,
Yeah.
please?
Or it's like let him be a wolf. Why did you have to make him a human again?
Yeah.
He was so much happier as a wolf.
I bet like Night Eyes kind of feels claustrophobic and he's like, oh my God, like get this dude out of me. And he kind of like that makes him feel how Fitz has felt kind of this whole book with Night Eyes always in the back of his mind, like even when he's doing like sneaky like bedroom things and he doesn't want that. But then like when he goes into Night Eyes, he's like, I'm here for everything. You cannot
Yeah.
escape me.
Well, like the way they describe it, it's just like, finally, dude, you are on my level. Like Night Eyes loves it.
But I think at the end he's like, yeah, it's time to go. Like you need to go back into your own body.
I think
Yeah.
he does that like later, but then I think the last thing that Night Eyes does in his book, he's like he gives out like a super sad howl. He's
Yeah.
just like, no, don't take my other half away from me. But yeah, okay, long time coming. First, we have some mishaps and bad stuff happening.
Oh yay.
Okay, I was reading the intro of this chapter, and it's like, is this literally the first and last time that Keeble, Robred, and the Pale Woman are mentioned? I feel like this is maybe I'm missing like one other mention in this trilogy, but I feel like this is like they're just like offhandedly like, yeah, by the way,
Yeah, I
here are
think
the big bads. And I remember like when I first read this series, I like latched onto this, and I was so sure that like the entire last book
this is
was gonna be
important.
like, yeah, and then like, and then it doesn't really explore it, but yeah. And
I was wondering if the rating war that they mentioned during like King Wisdom's time was also brought on by like a white prophet or someone from Claris. Like, is this actually literally just history repeating itself and Claris like trying another go at taking out the Farseers?
I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for that meddling white prophet and Catalyst.
That meddling kid and his dog.
I mean, I guess that's what the Catalysts are, pretty much. But yeah, that would make sense, and it puts kind of like, yeah, it puts like a really like darker spin on like that whole thing, because instead of just being like an incidental history repeats itself, it's like, no, they're gonna keep trying to crank history in this direction.
Yeah.
Right, like this is another malicious attempt by this group of people to manipulate a war and wipe out an entire like country.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get rid of basically skill users because skill users are all coming from the Six Duchies and the Farseers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
yeah, which is also
very malicious. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say, like, the first time I was reading this, I don't think I put together that's like that's why the Farseers are important, that they're like skilled. I was just like, oh yeah, it's just because in all of these fantasy books, like monarchs are important. But yeah, it's just kind of like, it's like this whole happenstance thing where it's just like the Farseers just happen to be the one pure bloodline that mixed with the original Six Duchies people and the Out Islanders, and like they could like they didn't necessarily have to be the bloodline that became monarchs, but that's just how it ended up. It's like, wow.
Yeah, they weren't special to begin with. They just kind of became special because they made skilling such an elite and like hidden thing.
Because the other thing I had from the intro that I missed completely is like they mentioned that like in the Out Islands there's like glaciers churning, there's a change in the water, like it gives me like sort of like first hints at like the environmentalist themes. It's like well, here's literal effects of global warming happening.
Yeah, it gave me very global warming vibes when I was reading it this time, and I did not pick up on it at all the first 2 times I read this. But I was like, I'm sensing very much climate change themes here.
I took it in a different direction. I thought that it was like because of the pale woman, because she was like drilling into the glacier or whatever, and that's what like was causing all of these big changes for the Out Islanders.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
also
maybe.
like totally possible for sure. Because there is like that extensive ice network, and like we know that like she and Prilkop basically like in their own ways made Aslavjal seem like Icefire was doing stuff. Like so yeah, I could totally see that.
And isn't she like trying to get to Icefire to kill him or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah, she ends up like Fitz finds a hole that goes all the way to his skin, and there are like tools there, like someone was trying to get under the scales to like kill him.
Or like
see how
get
well
to
that
his
worked out.
heart. Mm-hmm.
Right. Poor Icefire. He's just like trying to nap.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Icefire literally
can't
took the
even
world's
move.
longest nap.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He said, "I'll see you guys later. I'm taking a nap."
He also gives me.
I mean, honestly, seems
Him
like
and
he has a pretty good life. He takes the world's longest nap, gets up, and then like for the next like however many years.
immediately make.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
Him and Tintaglia both give me claustrophobia, just like B does, because they're like trapped, but
yeah.
and can't move and can't
And
get
they
out
need
by
somebody else's
themselves.
help. Like that makes me feel like if that was me, I would freak out.
Yeah, I would too.
Mm-hmm.
I would fully freak out. Like, I know Tintaglia's kind of a bitch, but I don't blame her for being a bitch to Malta and Rain when they're like the only ones that can hear her and they're not
Helping
like
her get out.
trying harder to get
Yeah.
her out. Because if I was trapped like that for like hundreds of years, I would be way more of a bitch
Yeah.
than Tintaglia even was.
She's like, you killed all of my like brethren, and
yeah.
And it's like just
And now you're leaving me trapped in this log.
yeah, just come here, like come like you've killed all of my friends. What is like 1 or 2 of your lives for mine?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I think like I kind of like Tintaglia being like this tremendous bitch because I think that like we see also that like part of it is because she's trying to live up to the legacy of dragons. So she's almost like not really hamming it up, but she's like she's amplifying it or putting on a facade to some degree where she's like, I have to be the dragoniest dragon that ever dragoned because I'm representing my entire race now.
Yeah. She's like, I am dragons. When people think of the name dragon, it's going to be me. When you look up the term dragon in the dictionary, my face shows up.
Oh yeah, we're finally at chapter 20, so I get to be like, what the fuck, Shade? Because Shade's like entire thing is like, well, we're only supposed to kill on the order of the king, otherwise it's treason. Killing for yourself is always murder. And it's like, no, you're still killing for the kingdom, dog. Like, do the math. Like, he says like, oh, you kill only on the judgment of the king. What if the king's judgment is clouded? What if it's being manipulated? Like, it comes down to like, if you do the math, 1 treason from you plus 2 treason from Regal, you basically cancels out into -1 treason.
Yeah, that math adds up. Somebody show it to Shade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like murder's still murder, Shade. And like, what if you have another Game of Thrones analogy? What if there was like a mad king that was just like, torture somebody in front of me, And if you don't do it, then I'm going to say you're treasonous because I'm the king. It's like...
Yeah, has this never happened before that there's
honestly,
been, like, a farseer who's a dick? I feel like if that's the case, they've had a really lucky, like, streak.
I think just
right.
not in Shade's
Well, and like...
lifetime.
I really believe that King
Shade
Bounty
was-
must have been an asshole, and he just, like, conveniently, like, covered it up in history. Just because of, like, how the skill completely died out in his reign, basically.
Yeah, I believe that.
I was going to say something now. I don't remember what it was. Oh, well. I'll probably remember.
All the things that I noted from this chapter were like about the Fool. Because anytime the Fool is in something, I'm obsessed. I'm like, it's the Fool time. Like, I need to pay extra attention. But I just feel so bad for the Fool in this chapter. The way they get beat up. And you know that it's Regal. Or like Serene and Justin. Like, it's somebody close beating up my poor baby. Nobody touch him.
Yeah,
I know.
and that line where it's like strange how the act I had been about to commit now seemed so monstrous when I discovered someone else had already done it. It's like it's like that really like skin crawling feeling, and I feel like like almost anyone has had like that shameful. Obviously not with like beating someone to, like half to death, but like on like a smaller scale where like you say something petty and vindictive to a friend, but you know if someone else said that to them, you would like beat the shit out of them.
Yeah, you'd throw hands.
And it's just like, but yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it is made even worse when the Fool says, silly me to think there was such a thing as a safe place in the world. Like, oh, just rip out my heart, why don't you? Because I don't need it anymore. It stopped.
I feel so bad for him that like his safe haven is just destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And then joking and be
Get
like,
so
better
little
get a better
privacy.
lock on your door. Like,
yeah, and the description is like his smile had none of the warmth or mirth that it usually did.
Yeah.
And it's like
really
I
sad.
hate it. And then we learn in this chapter the real reason why Patience is pissed at Birch all the time.
Mm-hmm. Which is that they were in love.
All three of them. It was a love triangle because they... Well, is it a triangle or is it a square because everyone loves each other?
I think it's a square. And it's ironic that it's a square because basically the Fool and Fitz have very similar parental structures. They have two dads and one mom.
I like that. That's true.
Did not put that together, but yeah. And it's like this whole thing of like this series does themes really well, and like this whole theme of like duty versus the self is something that just like comes back again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I love how it's expressed like in different ways, because like Fitz's duty is sort of like this blind royalty, like royal duty to the kingdom and its people, while Burge's duty, like sense of duty, is to the people he loves and trusts and cares about, and that ends up making, I think, in the end, Burge like that's why Burge, I think, doesn't like become disillusioned by his version of duty in the end, because he ends up like he transfers that sort of duty to Molly. He ends up having that duty to his children, and eventually he comes back and finds Fitz. Meanwhile, Fitz spends his entire life trying to escape the duties that he has and like regretting them.
Yeah,
And not to say that like Birch doesn't also regret like not getting with Patience, but it's sort of like I feel like it's a sort of thing of like if I'd regarded that as my duty as well, instead of being like, nah, that I can't have both of them.
Burrich, like, never will let go of the promise he made to Chivalry to do right by Fitz, and then when he fails, or what he perceives as fails with Fitz, that transfers onto Nettle, which Molly is kind of encompassed by. And he's just so determined to like his loyalty was really to chivalry and to whatever extends beyond chivalry. Like he's like, this is chivalry's granddaughter, so I need to protect her in every way that I can.
And then he's like, actually, she's gonna be my daughter now.
Yep.
My son had a kid, it's my daughter.
Yeah, my only other note for this chapter was in the same conversation, Molly is like, one man can't stop them, referring to like the whole like red ships. And it's like, technically true, but Verity gets damn close. And
Oh, he
Fitz
sure
kind
does.
of counts as the person. Yeah, and Fitz kind of counts as the one person who does it, who can do it because he's the catalyst. But not really, because it ends up being like a whole group of people, and it's more like Kettle and Verity do it together. But like, Fitz is like the agent of all of that, so you could say that.
If Fitz
makes it
hadn't
happen.
been there, Kettle wouldn't have even gotten there. And then without Kettle,
For sure.
yeah.
So it
he
all
is kind
goes
of
back
like
to Fitz. He's
the
the
rock
best.
that starts the rock slide, yeah. My only other note is I think I could be like forgetting, but this is the first time I either see Molly mention the Fool or the Fool mention Molly, like vice versa. But the Fool just straight up asks, is Molly pregnant? And it's just funny to me that like Fitz fully thinks that his affair with Molly is completely secret, but the Fool obviously knows and like doesn't mince words about it. He's just straight up like, I know what you're doing and who you're doing it with. Is she
Just
pregnant?
tell me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's no
but
beating
like,
around the
I
bush.
almost feel like the Fool is a little bit of a dick here, because he doesn't say, is Molly pregnant? He's like, do you have a Fitz of your own? And I'm like, did you really did you have to say it like that? Come on now.
I mean, it wouldn't be the Fool if they didn't do that.
No,
Right.
absolutely.
You think that would
But
spark some
also,
critical thinking in Fitz, though, being like, I don't want to create a bastard that will have the type of life that I have, but he just doesn't.
He's
It
like,
doesn't
let
occur
me
to him.
still continue like hanging out with
Yeah.
Molly in the bedroom.
Fitz is amazing because he's like the protagonist who he has like a bunch of character development throughout the series, but then like he's at the point of his life now where like scene to scene he will not retain any lessons.
Yeah. Yes.
If we could just keep him in the same place and have everyone like come to him, I feel like there could be a chance. But no.
Anytime he walks out a doorway, he forgets what was said before. It's like,
Yep.
new door,
100%.
new mind.
Mm. Okay, do we have anything else for this chapter?
No.
No.
Okay, then our last chapter for this episode is chapter 21, Dark Days, which, like, basically the plot summary is shit still sucks and it's only getting worse. Those specifically what happens is Duke Brondy of Burns and his daughters Slarty and Faith come seeking aid from the kingdom after the attack we saw 2 chapters ago on Ferry. Shrewd, we don't see the details, but Shrewd is obviously unhelpful, and they keep them waiting for a while. Regal's partying all the time, and so it offends the Duke. And finally, it's up to Ketrican to reach out to them, help give them some funds to rebuild, and essentially build alliances of her own, and try to keep the kingdom together when Regal is trying his best to push it apart.
I love that Verity in this chapter when he's skilling with Shrewd. Shrewd says, we can no longer trust your foreign wife. Verity immediately is just like shuts it down. He doesn't even doubt that Ketrican is loyal. Like, it would be, I would imagine, hard to be pulled between like your father and your wife like that. But he doesn't even consider that Ketrican isn't being loyal. And probably part of it is that he can see what Fitz is seeing, but...
Yeah. Well, it also doesn't help when you're like always being considered second best in your father's eyes that you're like gonna kind of be rebellious and lean towards like your girlfriend or your wife rather than like what your father says.
Yeah, that's a good
But
point.
also Shrewd's like losing it, so that's also why.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons not to be in Shrewd's corner at this point.
Right.
The first thing I made note of in this chapter was, well, it was actually kind of just something I was wondering. Do you all think that Shade kind of has any inkling about Rosemary being a spy for Regal, or did he just kind of like overlook her as like some little child like we all did?
I don't
It was a genuine blind spot, is how I
Yeah.
felt.
I don't think
Everybody.
she's even on his radar at all.
But you would think him being so paranoid and so suspicious and the amount of spies that he has, like he's used children as spies before. So why
Right.
isn't this something that he at least looks into a little bit deeper than just, oh, there's a kid always with Ketrigan.
I think it's sort of the thing where it's like, by the time she's wormed her way into being Ketrigan's like constant companion, like it sort of like slips Shade's notice. I think like the whole when that like change first happens, I think that he's away, right? And he comes back and she's just sort of there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also just like I think it's just Shade fucked up. Like he's human and he's juggling so much.
Yeah, he does have a lot to worry about.
And like we're basically directly told that his like the majority of his efforts are on Shrewd at this point, like all of his energy there.
Yeah.
Is this the chapter where Verity has Fitz go get his mother's jewelry from his study? Or is that a different one?
I think that
It
was
might be
way
That's like
earlier.
a
I
few
think that was like
chapters back.
18, like, or 19.
Whoops.
It's the first chapter when it's the first
When
chapter
he's
when
gone.
he's away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 19.
I just think it's like wild that he had this plan. Like he got Fitz to get the jewelry and then had this plan of like having Ketrigan use it to help with the war if necessary. But then without knowing that, Ketrigan gives her own jewelry to Brondi to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, great minds really think alike.
Yeah, and they're both like selfless in that sense in a very similar way.
Yeah, they're
Which
both
is really nice to
sacrificed.
start. And it's really nice because the first half of the book there's been again like lots of them not seeing eye to eye, so to finally have them just like link up in that way, it was really nice to see.
Speaking of that scene, I think Fitz is a little bit ridiculous. He says when Celerity is kind of like not really paying much attention to him and she's kind of pissed off because like her dad's mad, he's like, I welcomed her slighting of me. At the same time it rankled, as I did not feel I deserved it. Like, you can't be happy that she's like mad at you and then also be like, but why? Like, I didn't do anything. She should still like me and be like fawning over me. Like, boy, what?
I think what it is that he's like offended on behalf of the kingdom, where he's like, look, I know you're pissed at me for not doing anything, but like our hands are all tied. Like, come on now. When like not really, but I think yeah, the way I read it is that he's like taking more offense less for himself, but like more on behalf of like the royals, sort of.
I read it as like
If
an
it is
ego
just
thing,
himself,
like
then
she's not paying attention to me anymore. Oh, I must be ugly.
That's how I read it too.
Just
And
because
I
I
was
wanted
like, you are
it to be
such a
dramatic.
right. You're such a
Mhm.
teenager, Fitz. Like,
absolutely.
this whole book is Fitz being hormonal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Though to be fair, it's not as though he stops being ridiculous once he grows up. If anything, he becomes worse.
Oh, absolutely.
That's true.
I guess like just talking about like celerity and stuff. I feel like the group of them, Bronte, Faith, and Celerity, like we see like just enough of them to make them really compelling and for us to have a good image of them, but then like not enough time in the story can be devoted to them that we get like a full picture of them, and it makes me so sad. Like you were mentioning like alternate history where like Fitz gets with Celerity. AU, I just want like sort of like a missing moments fic where we see like from the point of view of like the Burns like delegation, like the events of this book and the start of the next book. Especially like, isn't there like they have like a whole ass like last stand like sword fight at one point? I feel like that happens like I feel like Fitz like skill dreams that in the next book, and I'm like
Probably.
I would love to see more of that. Yeah.
We get kind of like an intro. Well, we've heard of Justin and Serene before, but this is the first time that they kind of directly threaten Fitz. And they just remind me of like villains out of a CW show. It's like Supernatural has entered the chat.
Yes.
They're just like caricatures of dumb bad guys. Like Justin has no idea.
They're like the
Neither of
evil
them really have
henchmen.
any idea. Yeah, yep.
Mhm.
I love how it plays out though, like with the fool making it seem like embarrassing Serene and being like, "What are you doing to that boy?"
Yeah. Why are you trying to come on
It's
to him?
it's so funny.
And it's like, I sure hope no one gossips about this.
And he turns to the mates. Don't tell anyone. Keep this quiet.
Yeah. And Serene's like, "It was him," and Fitz is just like bedridden, and the fool's like, "He doesn't look like he can do anything."
Is this true, Fitz? Did she try to come on to you? It's like, ah.
He's like, yes.
It's so funny.
I think it's so powerful though how Night Eyes attacks Justin. And that just I think proves
Yes.
kind of our theory that the skill and the wit aren't as separate as the Farseers would believe, just because like Night Eyes can use the skill link between them to attack Justin with the wit. Like they're definitely
Yeah,
connected.
he
And
can
I think
jump through it.
yeah, and I think that the dragons are like the epitome of it. Like they are the skill and the wit combined. And that's why people who I
Mhm.
don't think are like witted or have the skill, like everyone in the live ship traders, like that's why they can kind of understand and like communicate with the live ships and everything.
Mhm. I mean, the live ships are definitely, at the very least, witted
Yeah.
from like how they're described, or like they have like that like source of life,
Yeah,
like
they're like
how they talk about
alive.
like feeling their warmth throughout the decks and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, yeah, and yeah, like, definitely like the way they talk about like also like the stone dragons having like that influx of like skill and the wit as well, and those are meant to be imitation, like pale imitations of the actual
Yeah.
thing. So yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to recognize
But yeah, I
Night Eyes
love
as
how
the
like
goat.
if Fitz has to, yeah,
Yeah.
Fitz has to be like down boy, don't kill them too hard.
Yeah.
I wish he would have killed him in that instance though, because there'd be no way they could prove it was Fitz. Because Fitz is like so ill
Yeah.
that the
Mhm. And
fool
like the
could have
wounds
been like,
fade, so
yeah, the fool could have been like the witness, being like, "I saw Serene do this," and then they'd have one less skill user
Hell
to
yeah.
battle later.
I mean, two less if Serene gets locked up, and
That's
that would
true.
probably like
If she
that
was
would stop like their draining of like
shrewd.
Shrewd. Like how many people are draining? I know it was like Justin, Serene, and then like one other person. I
There's like
I thought it was
Carrot or
just those
whatever.
two.
No, because Carrot. Because if it was Carrot, it might have been Carrot. But I feel like if it was Carrot, then he would have died. I think it was like some random who like Fitz kills.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe the person he's with on the boat is Justin, the one that he's with on the boat earlier on. I can't remember.
It's either that one's either. Oh, that one is Justin, and he's trying to steal to Carrot.
Okay.
And like he's trying
Okay.
so hard to skill to him that Verity can't get through, and that's why Verity skills to Fitz
So
to tell him to go to
it's
Amber.
like Bert, Carrot, and Will are the ones that appear next book. Those are like the surviving skill users, and then like they all die.
Yeah.
But let me just like cheat and skip ahead and see where is it.
Something that I was wondering that I just like thought of when we were talking about this, why doesn't Serene just do whatever she's trying to do to Fitz? Why does she make Justin do it?
I wonder if she can't. We never really hear about like what level of ability she has. So I wonder if she really doesn't have much or like doesn't know how to control it or do anything with it.
So she's just kind of playing Galen again.
I think so. That's my theory at least. I don't think we ever find out cuz she dies.
Yeah.
But
and I went back and checked. It is just Serene and Justin who are doing the leeching.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It looks like there's like 4 chairs, but then like only Serene and Justin are there. So
maybe they were waiting for Will and whoever else was gonna come.
That or like Will. I think it might have been just like Will and Carrot are probably just like more heads up, and they're like, okay, time to split.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't have any other notes for this chapter. Did you guys have anything?
I think the last thing that I have was just kind of admiring Fitz and the way that he speaks like the Fool in Shade when the Fool asks him what he did to Shrewd when they were skilling together. And Fitz is like, oh, I did nothing to Shrewd. But what Shrewd did to me is like for him to tell and not me. And I'm like, oh, okay. Take a page out of all of their books, Fitz. Do it.
He can be eloquent when he wants to.
Yeah. And he can keep his mouth shut when he wants to, too. But I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, so basically just like not so slow build up to the end. We still have a while though. I think next chapter is, or next episode is going to be chapters 20 through 22 through like 26. And then we're probably going to have, I think we can finish off the book in the chapter after, in like the episode after that, mainly because like the last 2 chapters are like super short.
How many
like the wolf chapter.
Chapters are
there's like 32 chapters, but like the last 2 are like super short.
Short. Okay.
It's like
so
there's like the torture chapter, and then there's like I am a wolf chapter.
Yikes.
Actually, no, wait. Actually, the last 3 chapters, like there's torture, execution, and wolf days, all of which are like super short. Thankfully.
Yeah, super short, but no less painful.
Yeah. It's definitely still the most painful moments of the book are yet to come. So fun, great things to look forward to.
Yay!
But yeah, and also see you all next week. And also, I'll finally be back in America after this long hiatus. So hopefully, we'll be back to more regular recording and also like uploading times because that's been totally on me for being in a weird time zone and all of that. So
it's been a little bit of chaos, but I mean, this book is chaos, so it's kind of fitting.
Right.
On brand. I guess until next week. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.